Hello, today's video is going to be all about choosing a topic for your IRR. So you've taken this exciting class. Now, what are you going to write about for your first paper? My hope is by the end of this video, you'll be able to figure out how to best choose a paper topic that works for you and your group. So in order to understand how this sort of works, let's back up and look at how the different AP components work together in this class. So you have three things that add up to your AP score, which will hopefully be a 3, 4, or 5. The first piece of that is what we call the team project and presentation. This is what the first paper, the IRR, or individual research report, is part of. And this makes up 20% of your total AP score. And this is potentially the most complex of the papers because you have to start in a group, you have to work in your own lens and discipline, and then you come back together and build a unique presentation. That usually happens right in the fall when the course begins in the first couple months. And then after this, we head into the winter and spring where you get working on the IWA, the individual essay and presentation, which is a little bit different approach. And there's a full video on how this course works as well as how to prepare for the IWA in a separate video. And then there's an exam as well. 45% of your AP score will also just be from that one time you sit down to work on this exam that has these two parts. One where they give you an article and you have to analyze the argument, and another where they provide a series of texts, you find a shared theme, and you write an essay. I have a whole video explaining in depth how to prepare for the exam, and please go ahead and check that out if you are preparing for the exam. But this video is about that first component. It's all about the team project and presentation, and in particular, how you and your group can pick a topic, and then ultimately what you are going to write about in this topic for your own report. So let's go ahead and dive in. It can be a little complex here, but that's why I think this visual is really helpful. The very first step that you need to do is once you've got a group, sometimes your teacher picks groups for you, you may self-select, but typically there are groups of 3 to 4, maybe a group of 5. When I teach this course, I like to keep it at 3 or 4. And the group comes together, and your teacher may give you more of a boundary in regards to what sort of topics they want you to pick, but according to AP seminars, sort of course and exam description, there's no set topic that you have to explore as a group. However, some topics are more fitted for this performance task than others. The next thing that you'll do once you've picked a topic is you as a group are going to develop research questions or sort of things that you want to focus or learn about through this process. And then here is where it goes from group thinking, group planning to what you individually are going to produce in your IRR. Your team, let's say there's 4 of you, will produce 4 IRR papers, each of them through a different lens or discipline. This group will then create an argument for the solution once these papers are complete and presented to one another, and then you're going to present that as your presentation. So in green, that's what your group does together. In yellow, that's what you do. However, the yellow portion, the actual researching and writing of the paper, is the most time-intensive portion of this sequence. And so it's really important that you guys pick a topic that really can be explored in different lenses. And then also it's really important that you support your group by providing really quality work so that when it's time to put together the TMP, that presentation, you all are bringing things to the table equitably. Okay, so let's talk about that lens. So right there in the center in this graphic, you can see topic. That's what you and your group have to decide. However, you as an individual are going to explore this topic through a lens. Now, your teacher may discuss different lenses, but these are some of the ones I talk about. I talk about lenses like historical lenses, economic lenses, ethical, political, scientific, health, environment. There's a lot of potential lenses to explore a single topic. Now, sometimes these lenses could be discussed as disciplines. You might even think about like, okay, these are sort of like what majors might be, right? So if you're looking at something like immigration as an economics major versus immigration as a historian, It's the same topic, but you are going to be focused on different aspects of this topic. And that same sort of principle applies here with how your IRRs are going to be differentiated from one another. Student 1 might pick an economic look at the topic, student 3, political, and so forth. So let's talk about what this might look like in an actual example. Let's say you want to choose the topic of marijuana legalization. I've had a couple students pick this over the past. This is one of those topics that is very much debatable in our society. Some states going towards full legalization, other states still having marijuana possession and sale illegal. And so this is something that there's a lot of sources about, there's a lot of discussion about, and this is not a bad topic to pick because there's just so much to explore within it. So let's take a look at how these different papers might form around the group's topic of marijuana legalization. Let's say you are choosing to explore this historical. You might have a paper that explores the history of the war on drugs and how it's been ineffective in reducing marijuana use. Another student who picks the economic lens or discipline, they might look at the ways in which, okay, marijuana legalization has helped certain states or countries increase their revenue. And then let's say you are looking at political. You can explore the ways in which marijuana legalization differs in conservative and liberal states in the US. Here you can see all of these topics are still centered in the group's topic of marijuana legalization, but each of you have now gone off in your own discipline, your own lens, to provide a unique perspective that you can now bring back to your group and put together this presentation. The argument really lies in the presentation part, not so much the individual research report, right? It's a report. Later on in the course, you are going to write an individual written argument, the IWA, but the IRR doesn't necessarily have to be an argument as much as you are exploring part of a group topic through your lens and then bringing something to your group that you put together in a presentation that does have an argument. So this is just one example of how you might explore. First, you've picked the topic of marijuana legalization. Each group member has gone off and picked a lens and then explored a paper through that lens. Okay, let's try it again. Let's look at climate change. If you want to pause here and think about what you might write in those boxes before I talk a little bit about it, feel free. But I think this is a helpful piece of practice here. All right, so let's think about it. Maybe for historical, we're going to look at the historical warmings and coolings of the Earth and see, okay, to what extent does temperature fluctuate? Perhaps in economic, you can look at the green revolution, the pivot towards solar and renewable energy. Maybe in social and cultural, you can look at discussions about climate change in regards to religion. How does this play into religions that believe that the end times are coming, and how do they think about climate change in a world that they believe may be ending soon? So many different ways to explore this. You could also look at climate change and the way it's discussed in the US versus China. So many different things even within that lens, and the same could be said for each of these lenses. Climate change, great topic because it's broad enough to really be explored in all these different lenses. You could look at gentrification. Okay, what are the economics of gentrification? Who wins? Who loses in these situations? Health and environment. What does this do to the mental health of those displaced? All of these topics, broad enough, controversial and discussable enough, with enough sources to really be explored in different ways. Now, so many topics. Here's just some that I show my students to get their thinking started. Mass incarceration, artificial intelligence, fake news, the opioid crisis, blockchain, automation, vaccination. All of these things are large enough to be explored with a lot of lenses and debatable enough that there's experts talking about these issues. Now, like I said earlier, your teacher may have actually themed your course around an issue already, and so you may not be picking from this wide selection. But the same rules apply of making sure that your topic is going to be explored in different lenses and disciplines. This makes sure you're not all just producing the same paper, and it also gives you a chance to explore your own individual interests and potentially even look at what kind of things you might work on in a future major when you go to college and choose a discipline to study. Okay, so I've talked now a little bit about what the group has to decide, how you differentiate the different papers, and now let's get a little more focused on your topic, because just picking a lens and a group topic doesn't necessarily tell me what your paper's about. I remember talking to many students who say, oh, I'm doing immigration through an economic lens. Well, that actually is still fairly broad. Are we talking about immigration to Europe? Are we talking about immigration in the US? There's still ways we need to narrow and get more specific, even if we have our lens or discipline selected. So your IRR paper will have to become much more specific and targeted than the topic that your group is exploring, or even just the lens that you've selected. That's ultimately what is going to go into your IRR. So, one way we narrow this down is by writing strong research questions. And this helps us move from general to specific as we sort of name variables. All these slides and handouts that you're seeing in this video, if you're a teacher watching, I have all of this curriculum available. There's a link in the bio. I would appreciate any support. This is a hard class to plan for, so feel free to check those out and support the work I do. But let's get back to it here. We'll notice as we look at these examples that these broad topics get narrowed down when you consider specific variables, context, and aspects of your overarching subject. In AP Seminar, the more specific and focused that your research question is, you're going to be much more effective in conducting research and analysis that gives a report that is useful for your group and for your reader. All right, so let's look here. In this first example, we're going to see that the general topic this group has chosen is climate change. But look at how specific the research question gets. How has rising sea level due to climate change affected coastal communities in the Gulf of Mexico over the past 2 decades? Wow, look at all that extra language that gets it more specific. It's not just saying, how has climate change affected sea levels? That's approaching, it's a little more specific than just climate change, but here it's saying coastal communities in the Gulf of Mexico and over the past 2 decades. So the specific focus is the impact of climate change on the Gulf of Mexico, and we're looking at particularly rising sea levels. I'll be looking at things like Louisiana, coastal communities in Mexico, Texas, everywhere around there. That's the sort of research that I'm going to narrow down so that I'm not just looking at rising sea levels from everywhere, from island nations in the Indian Ocean to the Gulf of Mexico. This really helps me focus and give my reader a snapshot of a report. Okay, another general topic, artificial intelligence. Many of my students love to explore this because it changes so rapidly and it's such a controversial subject. But here is a question that helps narrow that and get it specific. It says, what ethical considerations and challenges are associated with the use of facial recognition technology in public spaces? Notice here, I'm talking about artificial intelligence. I can see my lens that I'm looking at an ethical paper. So I'm going to be looking at ethical arguments. Those are probably what are going to make up my body paragraphs. And then we're focused here on a specific AI application, facial recognition. And also a specific context, public spaces. So really great example here of how these students have moved from a general topic that their group chose. The lens is clearly there, and then they've made it more specific through its variables and context. Let's look at 2 more to really drive this home. The first, immigration. Great general topic, so many different ways to explore it, but let's look at how this person has narrowed it. Their research question says, what are the economic consequences of the Dreamers policy on employment and wages of undocumented immigrants who've arrived in the United States as children? The lens, economic. Specific focus, economic impact of the specific immigration policy, the Dreamers policy, and then on specific group, undocumented immigrants who arrived as children. DACA. Okay, next one, social media. Social media in and of itself, great topic, very broad. Let's look at how they narrowed it down. How does the use of Instagram as a platform for self-presentation affect the body image and self-esteem of teenage girls in the United States? Look at all that specific language. So we're looking at the influence of not every social media platform, but specifically Instagram and on a specific demographic. We even narrow it down on two things that we're gonna look at, which is body image and self-esteem. I can already see my body paragraphs starting to be formed, and that's one thing that's really helpful about doing this pre-work. You don't just have a blank page. Even in your research questions, you can begin to see what these different paragraphs are gonna do if they're gonna effectively answer that question. So this activity here, we have moved from general to specific. And if I was doing this with my students, I wouldn't just show them all this, but I would actually probably have them walk through this and attempt to make it general to specific before I show them these exemplars, or have them identify what the specific focus is with that example. Again, if you want to use my materials, check out the link in the bio. I have a full year-long curriculum there, as well as a lot of other YouTube videos that help explain AP Seminar. Okay, so those are great examples, but then how do you actually figure out how to make it specific? Well, one way to do that, this is not the only way to do it, but is to think about the 3 P's of your topic. Here are my 3 P's. The people, the problems that exist within my topic, and the phenomena. So people is like stakeholders, who is doing the impacting, who is being impacted, and then problems. Okay, if we're talking about immigration, what are some of the common things debated about immigration? And then phenomena, this is like solutions, actions, things that are already transpiring within your topic. So climate change, for example, EVs, renewable energy, these are phenomena. Problems would be more like pollution, rising sea levels. Stakeholders would be more like government, communities affected by climate change. These are some ways to start to think about your P's. This helps you narrow down what you actually want to write about. Let's think about this example. And again, if you want to pause and think about it before I talk about it, feel free to pause the video. We're going to say a couple P's for the topic of animal testing. Well, if we're looking at animal testing, some of the people involved would be researchers. Well, these aren't people, but what about the animals themselves? How about animal rights activists? How about those who work with industries that use animal testing, like cosmetic industries or pharmaceutical industries? The more we list, the more we can choose where we want to focus. Okay, what are some problems? Well, there's clearly ethical problems. Is this the right way to treat animals? There's also scientific problems. How effective is animal testing in really, translating that into how these drugs or these cosmetic products can be used on humans? Another thing is like, okay, is this efficient? Is this a good use of money? Is there cheaper and easier ways to do this? And then phenomena. We can look at some places, many places in Europe, they've banned it completely. Or beyond government solutions, we can see some cosmetic companies, they advertise, this is animal testing free. And so this is where we look at some of the things that have been done to address your problem. I know many of you just want to jump into the writing, but the more you stop and think about these specifics, the easier it is going to be when you get to the writing, because you can plan who you're going to look at, what you're going to look at, what really needs to go into your paper, even if you haven't done a bunch of the research already. So this is how you might want to identify the 3 P's. Ultimately, by now, you should now have a sense of how you move from a general topic that your group is going to explore, how to add in a lens, and then ultimately how to choose a topic for your individual research report that is specific enough, that is answerable enough in those 1,200 words that are going to go into your IRR. This helps set you up for success so that when you're done writing your paper, not only is it going to be successful, but it's going to be a 4 to 5 paragraph essay about 1,200 words that you can show your group. But remember, you are writing your own paper, and the grade you get on this paper is not dependent on your group. So you might do amazing on this paper, and then your group might drop the ball on the presentation. Or, God forbid, you might bomb the paper, maybe not even complete it. Your group can still do well on the presentation, but now it's going to be even harder because you've brought nothing to the table. So you really want to make sure you are working very hard on this paper. You do not want to leave your group high and dry. I have seen groups have very emotional moments when 3 out of 4 have done the paper and that one person just isn't taking it serious, because the TMP, the presentation, that grade you do share. So don't be that person who brings your group's presentation grade down because you didn't do the paper. So what about the paper and presentation? Well, after the paper is done, then you come together, now having become experts in your own topic and lens, and you're going to create a group argument. I, or your teacher, will give you the AP score for the presentation. However, your paper is going to be sent to College Board, and a grader from College Board is going to grade it, not knowing who you are. It's going to be completely anonymous. Now, in the actual presentation, your teacher will norm on this. There are videos about this as well on my channel, but you are going to present in a group, trying to split the load equally. Ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, this is the path to success for the IRR. I'm going to go back really quick and show you what I started with here. Just to remind you, the IRR and TMP works like this. You identify a topic as a group that's large enough to explore through multiple lenses and debatable enough that there's going to be sources out there on it. Then you start to develop a research question to kind of focus what you might want to look at. And then you yourself, once you have a lens that hopefully is different from all of your group members' lenses, you then have to figure out what your paper is going to be about. Thinking about your 3 Ps, getting specific so that your report is, yes, aligned with your group's topic, yes, through a lens, but also specific and insightful. Then your group is going to read all of each other's papers. You're going to put these pieces together to create a solution for a problem that you've discovered within your topic, and you're going to present that. That's the IRR, and that's how to pick a successful topic. If you'd like access to all of these materials, daily lessons, PowerPoints, handouts, Excel documents to help you organize things, please check out the link in the bio. Also, if you want to watch videos about other aspects of AP Seminar or AP Research, please check out the link and enjoy this wonderful chance to explore your own interests in this unique course and hopefully earn some College Board credit. All right, ladies and gentlemen, good luck and happy writing. May you all get that 3, 4, 5, or whatever you need to get to feel proud of all the hard work you're going to do in this course.